Right, hello then everybody, Adam Clery from FourFourTwo here, and Manuel Ugarte has gone to Manchester United. It sounded a lot better in my head. Now, as any of you who watched Erik 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗥𝗔-𝗧𝗜𝗠 side last season will know, Manchester United are very good at doing certain things and almost comically bad at doing certain others. And as we saw in the Brighton game already this season, those problems have not magically gone away. But does the arrival of this man here for the pricely sum of £50 million solve any of those problems? Well, to dust off my favourite possible introduction, to quote Reverend Lovejoy from The Simpsons, long answer, yes, with an if. Short answer, no, with a but. Okay, so this season so far, this has been Manchester United, except it's technically sorted that, except technically it's sorted that. This 4-2-2-2, but in reality, let's not mess about. It's kind of like a 4-2-3-1. Anyway, that's Man United, but this is Manuel Ugarte. To be as direct as possible with you, they've kind of gone and re-signed like a slightly more modern Roy Keane, but not anywhere near more modern enough, if that makes sense. He's just this really aggressive front foot defensive midfielder. Like, he covers the ground brilliantly and he's excellent in a tackle, which are two things Man United desperately need. But unlike 𝗕𝗫𝗏, who did those two things and they already had, he also reads the game ahead of him at a top level. They need that as well. Now, here's the thing, right? If you asked me personally to go and build a Premier League team from scratch, I would absolutely go and get a Manuel Ugarte. Specifically, I would go and get 𝗕𝗫𝗍𝗀𝗍𝗓, but if I couldn't get him, I would be quite happy with actual Manuel Ugarte. But the problem with that statement is that nobody would ever let me build a Premier League team, would they? Be like letting a Labrador drive a car. So first off, what are the obvious positives? Well, if we look at his defensive numbers from last season, that should be a gasp that you are doing. These numbers are comparative to all the other midfielders in the Premier League, Serie A, La Liga, Bundesliga, and Ligue 1, where he was playing. He is practically top in every single category when it comes to winning the ball back. In fact, when you average all those out for a total score, he comes only behind 𝗕𝗫𝗍𝗀𝗍𝗓, who I just mentioned before, for ball winning in Europe. Like, that's incredible. And interestingly, unlike a lot of other players who score very highly in these sort of categories, there's no real drop-off in the areas of the pitch. He's one of the best at winning it back in his own third, one of the best at winning it back in the middle third, and one of the best at winning it back in the final third. So see what I mean? A really aggressive front foot ball-winning central midfielder. There's, I think, 50% technique, like how good are you physically at executing a standing or a sliding tackle, but also 50% like reading of the game and timing. Like, it's all well and good being a hard bastard who can smash into people, but if you don't pick your moments, if you don't go at the right times, you're kind of useless. Ugarte is the top draw for both of those things. I'll put it this way, right? For a team that used to have Roy Keane in it, I think regardless of Man United's fortunes this season, their fans will love this guy. Like, you know what it's like when you're not playing particularly well and someone just goes in and smashes into the opposition and wins the ball back and gets that big cheer out of everyone? Ugarte will give you that, if naught else. So it's pretty obvious to see the reasons why Man United have gone for a player like him, because despite the formations or whatever they're doing at the top end of the pitch, they do tend to come out in a 3-2-5 when they're in possession, and that is simultaneously their greatest strength, but also their biggest weakness. Like, if we show you their average positions map from the Brighton game, you can actually sort of see that borne out in the stats here. Now, Ten Hag has a couple of different methods for getting this shape together when they're attacking, and I actually think as the season goes on, you'll see more of like a 3-1-6, but that's a video for another time. Against Brighton and large chunks of last season, this tended to be how they came out. You've got an attacking row of 5 players here. There's one of the fullbacks, there's the 8s, there's the forwards, etc. Then the 2 central midfielders, the double pivot, and then 3 at the back. Now, this is like incredibly attacking, by the way. Like, say what you like about Erik ten Hag, he does have Man United play on the front foot, playing forward, looking to dominate chances, looking to score goals. The only problem is, when you play this way, it leaves you quite vulnerable in the middle if you haven't got the right kind of players. And I genuinely can't bring myself to go into it because we talked about it genuinely about 10 or 15 times last season because of the lack of pace at the back for Manchester United. These defenders did not push up with the rest of the attack, so they had this huge gap between the forwards and the lads at the back, leaving these two in the middle constantly chasing around, trying to snuff out counter-attack. And obviously the hope is by signing 𝗬𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗍𝗏, by signing 𝗬𝗫𝗏𝗏, by signing Mazraoui, they're adding extra pace at the back to try and offset that, but only one of these players started that game, so the same problem happened again. And if I take you to that Brighton chance where James Milner looked like he scored, this was just Man United last season all over. You can see the forwards have pressed right up. They're trying to close Brighton down during their build-up, but Brighton managed to beat that first line of pressure and get it into the midfield. And when it comes into the middle there, if we just pause it here, you can see that despite Harry Maguire getting a rush of blood and pressing out, the actual Man United defensive line isn't really anywhere near the rest of this team. They're like 10, 15 yards back into their own half. There's this enormous gap between the defence and the midfield. And this one pass out of defence has now bypassed both Casemiro and Mainoo, forcing Martinez to get the idea in his head that he must now charge out and try and do something about this ball. But of course, he is easily bypassed. And once again, for like the millionth time under Erik ten Hag, Man United find themselves sprinting back towards their own goal. And this is the hallmark of a team that simply does not cover the space well, doesn't have enough mobility in the centre, doesn't have the right decision making from the players around it. It's a huge weakness for them, but it's actually a strength of Ugarte. So I'm going to show you Casemiro's heat map from last season. He's sort of the player most likely to be directly replaced either in the starting 11 or across the course of the game by this arrival, right? This is how much he impacted the play across 25 games last season. But this, and I'm just going to gradually fade it out so you sort of get an appreciation of the difference, across the same 25 games, in fact almost the same number of minutes, is Ugarte's heat map from last season. And there's two things you need to know about this. First off, it's more dense. There's far fewer gaps dotted around for Ugarte than there is for Casemiro. So in those same number of minutes, it's impacting the game a bit more. Not drastically more, but certainly a bit more. But also, the most interesting bit, despite them playing almost the exact position in almost the exact system, Ugarte's weighted far more in the opposition half. Casemiro's the bulk is here and it tails off there. Ugarte's the bulk is here and it tails off there. So just to paraphrase there, not only is he doing things more aggressively, but he's doing things more in general. Now, the first part is explained because, as we've said, he's so aggressive, he is so on the front foot, he wants to squeeze the opposition and he drags the rest of the team with it while he does it. Like, he's much better protecting the back four when the player's in front of him, but he wants that back four to go as far up the pitch as possible. But the first part of that, the density, same number of minutes, same position, similar sort of system, how is he contributing more across the course of that season? Well, if you go and compare the defensive numbers from last season, you'll see that Casemiro is actually fantastic defensively. Like, for all the criticism he got, he still wins the ball back brilliantly, and he wins it back in every area of the pitch, just like Ugarte does. In fact, those numbers are virtually identical across the season, except in one area. Ladies and gentlemen, the power of the interception. The main difference between a player like Ugarte and a player like Casemiro is that Casemiro, while he certainly has the brain to read the game, does not have the physicality to cover the ground required. He might be able to see where he needs to cut a pass out, but there's no real guarantee he can get there. And the one thing above everything else Ugarte has is that physicality. He covers the pitch at a rate of knots. He's got some of the best interception numbers in world football because he reads the game excellently, yes, but he also has the body to go and enact that. I can see from the direction that Casemiro is jogging that he knows he's locking onto this player in the build-up, but that the out ball for the goalkeeper lies in this channel. Like, he motions towards it to try and reduce that gap, and sure enough, it flies past right in front of him. He's never going to get there and cut that out, but Ugarte might just intercept this here. But what's like a tiny little bit mad about this transfer is there was at PSG a bit of a known issue in his game that when you do then bypass him, it like takes his brain a couple of seconds to process the situation, given that it's just suddenly changed, and he can switch off a bit, and it makes his recovery runs a little sluggish. Like, I remember this vividly from when Newcastle played PSG in the Champions League. Like, it never really makes sense when you're watching him because he's normally so proactive and so aggressive and so front foot and so eager to go out and win the ball. But when you sort of like jumble the words up or give him a fresh Rubik's Cube, his brain makes like a duck, 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 duck noise while it sort of processes the information. And there is one other issue with him that might be a problem for Manchester United. Do you remember me saying he's like a modern version of Roy Keane, just sadly not modern enough? Well, what I mean by that is that he's got everything you need in the tackle. He's great at winning the ball back, but you can't really give it to him. And that is maybe the most glaring thing about Ugarte's game. Like, under pressure in these areas of the pitch here, he is more than capable of making a terrible decision and just handing the ball to the opposition. And in fact, my friends, not to keep going on about it, but that PSG 1, Newcastle 4 game that'll live in my heart forever, one thing I thought was noticeable about Newcastle's first goal is that theoretically, to play your way out of trouble here, Ugarte is the player they should have been looking for. Like, as the press comes in from Newcastle here, this is actually pretty much what you want because you've got an open pass into your defensive midfielder with a player who is closing him down, but crucially, not yet touch tight. So if you roll that into Ugarte, he can then bounce that off to the other centre-back here. You've drawn in these three players. You've got a lot of space to use. But he makes a really weird decision here. Like, instead of continuing to go into the space where he could receive the ball, he actually moves to the left, effectively going into the shadow of Anthony Gordon and ruling himself out. Because Bruno Guimaraes has got really close to this player here, Marquinhos has no wind it to the point where there was physically no danger whatsoever. You can see he did not want to give that ball to Ugarte. Clearly he knew that wasn't a good idea. But I mean, my word, what a roller coaster of emotions this video is. He's great in the tackle, which Man United need, but he's not very good when being pressed, which they definitely need as well. But I'll tell you why this could not be a problem in the long term. Why they might be able to mold him into exactly the player they need. Ugarte, despite not being a good passer of the ball, is actually a great passer of the ball. Sometimes. The guy has an absolutely fantastic long pass in him out to the flanks, whether it's floated, whether it's driven, whether it's to the left or it's to the right. He has this great ability to find a wide attacker. And that is incredibly useful to Manchester United this season because I mentioned that 3-1-6 shape before, right? If you imagine that in actuality with your 8s pushed up and they're there, 4 defenders, that's normally what they're going to be up against. That allows both the wide players to stretch the hell out of the pitch. And if all of a sudden you've got a midfielder with a great pass in him, that is a brilliant way to beat low blocks. As I said before, Man United this season are going to want to try and get this 3-1-6 thing going, right? It didn't really happen against Brighton, but it did happen once. That Andre Onana long ball out from the back. I mean, look how perfect this is. 3-1-6, right? And the reason you want 6 players in that forward line is because there's only 4 defenders. So you can see them all here, very narrow, very compact, marking these 4 players. It allows you wide players, whether they be your actual wide forwards or a fullback who's pushed up, to stretch the entire width of the pitch. Now, Onana finds 𝗈𝗏 brilliantly with that ball, but that's exactly the kind of pass that Ugarte could make as well. And if we just imagine this exact situation on the pitch here, if you're able to find a player like Ugarte in this position against a team who are pressing you high or have got a mid-block or something like that, and he can hit really accurate balls into these spaces here behind the defence, Man United will gobble that up all day. It's specifically what they're trying to do this season. So he can't really pass it intricately and short, but he clearly can pass it. So maybe they can work on that. So yeah, one of the more interesting transfers in this window for me, this one. I think Ugarte is a really good buy potentially, but as with most things at Man United, does have the potential to go spectacularly wrong. But anyway, that's just my opinion, and I've always got one. So if you are a Man United fan, or like, I don't know, Uruguayan, I guess, please let us know what you make of Ugarte in the comments below. If I've been saying it wrong the whole video, I've suddenly just started to doubt myself. All feelings, all thoughts, all everything, welcome down below. It's nearly time, less than 2 weeks until I do the great North Run with no knees, a bad heart, childhood asthma, and now my hamstring even hurt. So that's going to suck, but we are doing it for UK mental health charity Mind, who are just this amazing cause, very close to my heart. You guys have been so unbelievably generous with the donations. Like, we smashed past any target I realistically had. So if you haven't donated yet and you do have a couple of quid lying around, that money goes so much further than you know. So the link will be in the description below. And if you have donated, like, genuinely, wow, thank you. You get me on all the social medias at Adam Clery, 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏. The FourFourTwo socials are in the corner of the video. The latest Mbappe flavoured issue of FourFourTwo is, I think, on sale now. I've got a copy anyway, so that's nice for me. Whatever you see in the stores, go pick that one up because it's always a good read. And until next time, I've been Adam Clery. That's been Manuel Ugarte. I guess that's Onana. And that's him, the other lad. Bye.